Once upon a time, in a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and vast fields of rice, there lived a young man named Tenzin. Tenzin was known for his charm and wit, but he was also known for one other thing: his laziness. While others woke up with the sun, tending to their fields, cleaning their homes, or working to improve their skills, Tenzin stayed in bed, dreaming of better things, but never lifting a finger to achieve them. His days were filled with idleness. He often sat by the river, watching the fish swim lazily. Just like him, tomorrow, he'd say to himself, "I'll start tomorrow." But tomorrow never came. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. But Tenzin's life remained unchanged. Though he envied the success of others, he convinced himself that his inaction was fine, that one day, everything would magically fall into place. One day, as Tenzin was lazing by the river, he noticed an old monk walking slowly along the path. The monk, dressed in simple robes, carried with him a serene aura. His face was weathered but peaceful, as though life's struggles had shaped him into someone who had mastered himself. Intrigued, Tenzin called out to him, "Wise monk, can you help me find success and happiness? I desire these things, but it seems they evade me." The monk stopped and smiled kindly at Tenzin. "Success and happiness?" he asked, his voice soft but clear. "Those things are not found by those who only desire them. They are found by those who seek them with effort and discipline." Tenzin frowned. "But I don't know where to start. I want to change, but every day I find myself doing the same things. Too lazy to begin." The monk nodded and sat beside him by the river. "Let me tell you a story," he said, settling in. "There was once a young prince, much like you, who had everything he desired. But he too was lazy, finding excuses for why tomorrow would be the perfect day to start working on himself. His father, the king, grew concerned. He knew that without discipline, the prince would never be able to rule wisely. One day, the king called his son and handed him a delicate lotus flower. He said, "Take this flower and keep it alive. If you can, you will learn the secret to overcoming laziness." The prince, thinking it a simple task, agreed. He placed the flower in a vase, but soon forgot about it. Days passed, and the flower began to wilt. The prince was too lazy to change the water or care for it. Soon, the flower died, and the prince went to his father, ashamed. The king looked at his son and said, "Laziness is like letting this flower die. Each day that passes without effort is a day lost, a step away from success. Just as the flower withers without care, so does our potential without discipline." But the prince, still unwilling to learn, ignored the lesson. His days continued as they always had, filled with idleness and distraction. It wasn't until one day, during a famine that swept the kingdom, that the prince truly realized the consequences of his laziness. The crops failed because the farmers had been careless, much like he had been with his flower. People suffered, and the prince finally understood that his lack of discipline could lead to ruin, not just for himself, but for everyone he cared for. From that day forward, the prince began to wake with the sun, helping his people in the fields. He learned to plant, to tend, and to harvest, understanding that everything worth having requires effort and patience. Slowly, his kingdom flourished again, and when his father passed, the prince ruled wisely. He became known not for his laziness, but for his discipline and compassion. The monk paused, looking at Tenzin, who was deep in thought. "But how did the prince change so drastically?" Tenzin asked. "What made him finally overcome his laziness?" The monk smiled. Prince realized that discipline is not a punishment, but a path to freedom. You see, laziness keeps us in chains. We think we are free because we are doing nothing, but in truth we are bound by our own inaction. Discipline is the key to breaking those chains. It allows us to rise above the pull of comfort and desire for ease, and leads us toward growth and fulfillment. Tenzin sighed. "But how can I start? It feels like such a big task." The monk nodded knowingly. "Start small," he said. "Buddhism teaches that the path to enlightenment is walked step by step. Do not try to change everything at once. Begin with small, manageable tasks. Wake up at the same time each day. Spend just a few minutes doing something meaningful, whether it's meditating, learning, or working on a skill. Over time, as you see the results of your efforts, you will want to do more. Discipline, like a muscle, grows stronger with use. The monk then stood up, preparing to continue his journey. Remember, Tenzin, that true happiness and success come from within. It is not enough to wish for them. You must act, and in every action, no matter how small, there is progress. Start today, and tomorrow will take care of itself. Tenzin watched the monk walk away, his mind churning. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the weight of laziness pressing down on him. Instead, he felt a small spark of determination flicker inside. The next morning, Tenzin woke up with the sun. He didn't know exactly where he was headed or what his path would look like, but he took the monk's advice and started small. He cleaned his room, tended to his garden, and spent a few minutes each day in quiet meditation. The days were no longer filled with empty promises of tomorrow, but with action. As the weeks passed, Tenzin found that the more he did, the more he wanted to do. His laziness, once a constant companion, had begun to fade. In its place was a sense of purpose, a growing discipline that gave him strength and clarity. And though the path was long, Tenzin was no longer afraid. He knew now that discipline wasn't something to dread, but something to embrace. It was, after all, the key to unlocking the life he had always dreamed of. Tenzin's transformation was not immediate, but with each passing day, his commitment to discipline grew stronger. The village soon noticed the change in him, and those who once knew him as lazy began to seek his advice. He realized that the journey to overcome laziness was not just about conquering a single day, but about making small, consistent efforts each day. Through discipline, he had discovered not only success, but also inner peace. As Tenzin continued his journey, he understood that discipline was a lifelong practice, a balance between effort and mindfulness. The monk's story stayed with him, reminding him that the path to happiness and success was one he had to walk with intention and care. And in the stillness of his heart, he knew that, like the prince, he had broken the chains that had once bound him. If you found Tenzin's story inspiring and are looking for more wisdom and tips on overcoming laziness, finding discipline, and living a mindful life, be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that can guide you on your own journey to self-mastery and inner peace. Thanks for watching.